Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. On this episode, I am chatting with one of my favorite humans on this planet who has so much wisdom, so much knowledge, and so much sass. So, Maria, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So, let's dive in and talk about a moment during your journey where you felt utterly vulnerable, and what did you learn from that experience?
All right, let me caveat that with intentional vulnerability or like, oh my God, kind of vulnerability.
whatever one you whatever one
Okay.
you want to
Because,
share.
you have moments where you're like, now I'm trying very hard to be intentionally vulnerable because it is so against my nature to be,
Okay.
I'm a brown person in this world, so being vulnerable is dangerous. So, but
Right.
I'm purposely now trying to move in vulnerability, but there have been times in my life where I didn't want to be vulnerable, but I was. And I can think of lots of times, but growing up, I'm from North Philadelphia, and I talk like this, which is not okay. So I've always talked like this. And so I had a grandmother who was insistent that we speak the Queen's English. We weren't even allowed to say ain't in the house. So when
Really?
we moved to North Philadelphia, where I'm in the middle of North Philadelphia, and I walk in, hello, my name is Maria. How are you? Yeah, that did not go over well. And I just remember being the butt of so many jokes and being mercilessly picked on and teased about the way I talk. And it made me hit a point where I had to decide I can either blend in and lose
Mm.
it, and this is where we first started doing that phrase that we call code switching, um, and I had to code switch even amongst my peers. So there was one, when I am visiting my grandmother, I have to speak a certain way, and then when I'm in the middle of North Philadelphia, when I'm with my friends, I talk a different way, or when I'm at home, how I speak. And but I just remember a lot of switching back and forth, but I just realized at some point that this is inherently who I am.
Mm.
But I can act. So we start acting, and we just learn to blend. It was kind of weird that first summer of being there and trying to pick up slang very quickly because I didn't know anything. I didn't know any of the cool words or anything. What anything mean? What does that mean? What does that mean? It was just really, it was hard. And you're like 12 or 13. I think
Yeah.
I was like 12 or 13 when we moved to North Philadelphia, and that's already 13-year-old girl, that's a whole fucking episode all by itself of being a 13-year-old girl. But then you put in the fact that you're a misfit and that you don't fit in, and you're trying to blend in and be like everybody else, and yeah, it's a hot mess.
I didn't even know there was a term for that.
What, the code switching?
Code switching. Yeah, like I've
Oh
never even
yeah.
heard of that.
That's the thing that and I found out that other people do it too. It's not just my black culture, but other cultures,
Yeah.
because I have a friend whose parents are Hungarian, and how they answer the phone when the bill people are calling. Hello, how are you? Yes, we're quite aware of that. Yes. Oh, we'll get on that right away. You know what? I believe that check is already in the mail. That voice versus,
Yeah.
get your ass off of that. That if I tell you one more time, that's a slight different version of code switching, but yeah, every, people do that. It's just very pronounced. My undergrad is in sociology, so I love how much we think we're different, but we're really not that
Mm.
different.
That's so. Where did that come from? Like talking the Queen's English or whatever that is. I mean, where did that come from in your family?
Um, well, let's talk about privilege.
Okay,
Let's
let's talk about.
let's
Yeah.
talk about privilege. So there's, I'm sure you've probably heard of, white privilege. There's
Yes.
also black privilege. And
Okay.
I happen to, on my mother's side, be from the light skin
Okay.
black people. And so with that came a certain expectation of how you conducted yourself or carried yourself. And my family on my mother's side goes back very far, from all the way back. Our family seat is somewhere in Dale County, somewhere up in there. But we were, I guess, privileged more so than maybe other black people because of our light skin. And, we were
Huh.
landowners and, you know how all that stuff happens and comes about itself, but you you were expected to carry yourself a different way. And so it's, I always call it hoity-toityness, but this thing of, you're not supposed to talk like this, you're not supposed to act like this, you're just like, we're better, so we this is how we speak and this is how we talk, and this, you're expected to behave a certain kind of way. I remember my grandmother used to have a thing where, she would say, if we were out in public, you needed to, you were on your P's and Q's, on your best behavior in public, especially if white people are around. Like, you better
Wow.
not be cutting up. That was a definite conversation in the ladies' room. If you were cutting, you just didn't. You just didn't. You just knew not to. So it comes from that sort of thing where, um, if you spoke better English or you conducted yourself in a better way, then you have more opportunities. So you really can't fault people for, doing what they had to do to get ahead. But if you spoke better English, you had more opportunities for better jobs. And that's just the reality.
So
Even
what
now, I hate to say that, but even now, if I
yeah.
answer the phone like I'm from North Philadelphia on a job interview, more 9 times out of 10, I'm not getting that job. What's up? How you doing? No,
Right.
I'm not getting that job. So
No, that's true. I mean, I totally understand that. So what brought you from, so you went from this like proper way of being and went to Philadelphia.
and got hoodified.
Like what
That's a
brought your
word.
family there?
I got hoodified. Well, I wanted to fit in, like any other, middle schooler. I wanted to fit in. So I recognized that I've always been a bookworm, and I was kind of
Yeah.
a nerd and a geek, sci-fi kid, like, stuff like that. But those things weren't cool. And I grew up when hip hop was still a really very new thing. And, I'm
Mm.
in here reading books by Chaucer and Emerson, and my friends are listening to KRS-One and, Run DMC and stuff. And I went to, friends drugged me places and took me to shows. And the great thing about Philadelphia was there was an awesome music scene,
Yeah.
during the 80s, 90s period. So I got to see a lot of really great music. Um, but yeah, I tried my best to blend in, but I was still awkward. I was so awkward. Just so awkward.
So when
Um,
did you finally make peace with it and just be like, okay.
yeah, at some point I realized, I don't know, I reached a level of self awareness very early in my life, and I realized there's just no pleasing people. You
Mm.
know, there's no one group of people that is going to be more satisfied with who I am, and in the end, it really doesn't matter. So I think I was probably about 14 when I realized I'm just going to be myself, and whatever works and whatever doesn't, I'm just going to be awkward, and I'm gonna be the goofy, awkward black girl, so it'll be fine, it'll be fine, it'll be fine. And fortunately, I had a mom who was very hands off. She was just kind of like, do you, whatever you want to
Huh.
be, do that. And I know that my mom really would have really loved the popular cheerleader type girl, but that just wasn't who I was. Softball. I played softball. I tried to play basketball, but I wasn't that good at it. I was just big. Um, and yeah, I tried sports, but I liked poetry and music, and I did what I wanted to do, and my mom just kind of let me do what I wanted to do, and she never tried to enforce this fitting in thing or being like everybody else. She just said, just whatever you want to do you, which
That's kind
was
of
good. It was good
yeah.
because there was a lot of negative things too. And I just was not influenced by the negative stuff that was going on around me because I was just too busy being awkward and fun,
Because I was just gonna ask that, right? Because as kids and adolescents, we all face that, right? You can either take there's like a crossroads. You can get to this side, or you can go over here and do some
Right,
really bad, nasty stuff, right?
right.
Drugs, alcohol, all that stuff,
Yeah.
and
Teen pregnancy.
right, all that.
All of that, in my neighborhood, it wasn't uncommon for girls to start having babies at 14, 13, 14,
Wow.
15 years old is normal. I remember being like 16 or 17 and people were kind of looking at me like, what's wrong with you? You haven't had a baby yet.
Did you feel like there was something like? Did you feel pressure to have a kid?
I felt, yeah, I did. I felt
You did.
pressured to be like everybody else. Like, you know, I just didn't, just wasn't my life. I just had other things I wanted to do, and I was just like, oh yeah, no, no,
And do you
no.
think though part of that came from the fact that you had freedom to be who you wanted to be? Because I know sometimes when parents have an idea of like this is how I want my kid to be, or this is how right, there's this rebellious streak of like
Mhm.
F you, I ain't gonna be that.
Yeah, I think that was my rebellion, was that I just wasn't going to do what people expected me to do. I've always been stubborn. I remember,
I was gonna say I don't know that that's changed, has it?
no, it hasn't. I just gonna do what I want to do. And I remember a teacher telling my mom to make me do something. And my mom was like, have you met her? It's like, have you met this? Do you even know who she is? Because if she's not, and because I was a kid, I didn't care about consequences, which is also a reason why it was a good thing. I was a good kid. I did not care about consequences. I don't care.
Really?
Yeah, I was the teacher were like, well, you're gonna do this, and if you don't do this, and I was like, I don't care. I don't care. If
You were like my sister. My sister was like I got grounded and stuff got taken away. I changed. I was like, oh hell no, you're not taking my sister. You could take anything. My mom took
Yeah, like
everything
I
from her,
was
and she didn't care.
threatened. My mom would threaten to beat me, punishment, being grounded forever. I didn't care. If I thought I was right, I didn't care. I don't care what the consequences are. Like I said, it worked out in my favor that I was basically a good kid. I wasn't making bad choices. Um, my mom, later on was like, "Yeah, it was a good thing that you were a good kid because, like, yeah, there were no. I didn't care. I didn't care what the consequences were. Like, I got suspended. I got in trouble. I used to get in trouble in school. I used to get into fights a lot. I didn't care. If I thought I was right, I didn't care. I
Why were you
did not.
fighting?
I was fighting. I told you I was weird.
I know, but usually okay, so and this is just my understanding, right? So what do I know? But like the geeky weird kid typically, right, is not the one fighting. It's usually the one getting beaten up, but isn't necessarily the one fighting.
Well, I'm 5'6", and I've been at least 5'4" since I was 11 years old.
Right.
So we moved a lot, so I was always the new kid, and I grew up in tough neighborhoods, and so you had to fight. It was
Oh,
just
okay.
you just had to. If you didn't want to be tormented for the entire school year, you had to fight. Um, and so that was just necessary. And my mom, who was just my mom, Taurus, same day birthday as
I'm a
yours,
Taurus.
Taurus that she was. My mom was like, "You're gonna fight them, or you're gonna fight me."
Ooh, gee, really?
And I didn't want to fight her, so I would have to go beat the hell out of somebody else. And I was like, "You see me? I'm hitting her, mom. Okay, can I
Oh
come
my
home
God.
now?"
What?
Yeah.
I've never heard any parent say that.
My mom, like I said, my mom had a very different parenting style. She was both my parents actually. My mom was, I think once I became about 10 or 11 and I was as big as she was,
Yeah.
then we had to like she had to come to a different form of how she was going to punish me because she couldn't just threaten to, hit me or something. So my mom was, I think a lot of my mom trusted me. And,
Mhm.
and at some point we kind of did a role reversal and I became the mom and she
Mm.
became the rebellious teenager. So yeah, we did do a role reversal. And so at some points my mom's form of discipline was just more or less, um, yeah, why are you doing that? Don't do that. And I didn't get into trouble much after middle school. After middle school, I kind of like I just did what I wanted to do, and my mom was just kind of okay with it.
So you
I
kind
just
of
didn't take
kind of grew
advantage
out
of
of
it.
it.
I didn't have like I never had a curfew.
You never had a curfew.
No, only when I was with my parents split up when I was like 4 or 5. But when I was with my dad, yeah, 10 o'clock, you better be on the other side of this door, and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
My dad was more strict, but my mom was just kind of like be home. Sometimes me and my mom were coming home at the same time, like it was
Okay.
different.
I don't know how
Yeah, me and
good
my
that is,
mom coming
but
home from the clubs at the same time. My mom is like, "Where'd you go?" "Oh, we were over at the Trocadero." My mom was like, "Oh, we were at the Pterodactyl," that kind of thing. 3 o'clock in the morning, on a Thursday
how old
night.
were you then?
I was probably about, I don't know, maybe 15, 16.
Jesus.
Yeah. It was different. It was very different. But again, my mom trusted me, and I never gave her a reason not to trust me.
Yeah.
Um, most nights I was at home at 11 ish, but I didn't.
Ish.
I think I might have come home at like 4 o'clock a couple of times. But with good reasons, stuff happens, and she bought it. So, God rest her.
So,
She's in heaven now, going, I know now.
so you knew how to work the system.
Yeah, pretty much. I knew how to work my mom, and my dad was not going for it. My dad was a little bit more hip to me, probably because we think alike. My dad and I think a lot more alike. So my dad would just be like, "No, absolutely not."
So did you struggle like going between the two different environments?
Yeah, it was a struggle. I love my dad, but his household was more maintained and more routine, and I had a
Hmm.
stepmom, and it was kind of like, yeah, in the house by 10 o'clock, and we're not going anywhere, and you get that homework done, and you do
Yeah.
this, and don't talk back, and it was much more structured, whereas but it was good because the good thing was, 6 o'clock, there was always dinner on the table.
Yeah.
There was the laundry was always done. There was a house, roof overhead. Life with my mom was kind of precarious. Like, where are we living this week?
So did you, yeah, because I mean, those are two very different environments.
Yeah, polar environments. I can't even imagine my parents married. They're just two totally different people.
Right. But
Yeah.
I think for you growing up and being in that, right, and being shaped by that,
Mhm.
going from two extreme, did you ever like look at your mom and think, I don't want that? Like I miss
Yeah,
structure or
I totally did. I always say, um, I went from Good Times Black to Cosby Black.
okay. Explain that. For people
So
who
do you remember
don't
the
get
TV
it.
show? I was going. Do you remember the TV show Good Times, where
I
they
do,
basically
yes.
lived in the projects, and it was always something. It was one chaotic thing, one crisis moment. It was always something, and that was
Right.
life with mom. That was Good Times. And then we remember the Cosby Show, where there was Cleo, and yeah, I really wanted Clara Huxtable to be my mom because she was just so awesome. And there was fun, there was chaos, but it was fun, and there was always happy, and everybody
Right.
grew up probably watching way too much television, but those were the two different scenarios. And in my own life, I recognize that I don't thrive well in chaos. And unfortunately, because of my mom's mental state and her life choices, that's just the best that she could do. And I've come to
Hmm.
terms with that Claire Huxtable is not a real person. I'm sure. And even though it would have been great to have that person as my mom, that is not a real person. And for whatever reason, I chose, Nancy to be my mom, and it made me who I am.
Right.
And my dad is great, and I love him, but his lifestyle, I don't really necessarily want his lifestyle either. I got used to doing my own thing, and so I am who I am, and it's a beautiful chaotic mess, but it's structured and fun. And you
Did you
can
have to
have
like
both.
Yes, did you have to process? That's what I was going to ask. Did you have to like process through that to
Yeah,
find
it was a
you?
lot of process. I have made some bad choices in life. I've done some stupid stuff. But I recognize that I've been blessed.
Mm,
I had some privileges that other people didn't get. Especially growing up in North Philadelphia. DNA wise, I was smart. You get what you get, and I was smart. I was the first 5 years of my life, I was blessed. That's why I'm really big proponent of early childhood education. First 5 years of my life, I was very, very blessed to have a lot of the love of learning pushed
mm.
into me, and so I became a bookworm really early. I love books. Books became my drug of choice. It's how I isolated. It's how I dealt with stress or things. I read a lot. I'm charming. That's that Leo part of me. So I could get away with a lot of stuff at school because I'm sweet and I was well read and I sounded smart, and teachers would cut me a lot of slack, especially when I was cut in school a lot. You'd be like, I know I missed, all of last week because I wasn't here. But I promise I'll make it up. The teachers say like, well, if you get this work done and turn it in, then I'll cut you some slack and you'll still, I still was able, I got away with a lot of stuff. And I recognized that I got away with a lot of stuff because it was charming.
Right.
And teachers, I had a lot of teachers who really believed in me and who gave me second chances, that I recognize that some of my peers did not get second chances.
What was your all time? What's your favorite book?
Favorite book, The Color Purple.
Really? That's a good
Yeah.
book.
I read it when I was 14. It changed my entire life trajectory. That's one of those reasons why I recognized that I could just be absolutely who I was. And there was nothing wrong with me, that I was just who I am. And that was the book that did it. So, yeah, Color
Why?
Purple.
What about that book did that for you?
One, it talked about surviving sexual abuse.
Mm,
And that was something that I didn't realize other people had experienced because,
mm,
we don't talk about stuff. And this book was the way Alice wrote the book, it was just like right on the first page. This is what happened. And it was like, oh, somebody else went through this and they survived and they got through it and they had a life. And yeah, they were kind of downtrodden and they were it took them a while to really recognize and see the beauty in themselves. I love that line where it says it pisses God off when you walk past the color purple and don't notice it. So yeah, that's my book. And about every 2 years I read it again just to see if I still have the same feeling for it. And I
and do
do.
you? So before that book, did you even recognize or know that, like, I know I've talked to some people who've experienced that and they're like, recently, I didn't even realize I was being abused.
Oh, I
You
knew
know
I
what I
was
mean?
being abused. I just didn't know what to do about it. And when you're a little child, especially when this happens before the age of 10 or 9, when this is like when you're still in single digits, I
Right.
didn't know what to do about it. I knew it wasn't right and I knew it was off. And then when it took me till I was about 8 to have the actual words to figure out I need to tell somebody what's happening, and the person I trusted to help me didn't. And so at about 8 years old, I realized I was kind of alone in the world and that I would have to,
Yeah.
that's when it was like an epiphany. At that moment, at 8 years old, I recognized I have to take care of myself because the people who are supposed to be taking care of me can't.
So what do you do
So
at 8 years old with that?
yeah, what do you do with
Right.
that? You just,
Right.
you think, oh gosh, the world is a really upsetting place, isn't it? Yeah, but I'm going to get through this. And I don't know, somewhere at 8 years old in my little 8 year old mind, I figured, okay, well, I'll just read books and, I'll stay to myself and people will leave me alone and I'll be fine. I'll be okay. I'll survive. That's like when you start moving in survivor mode as
Hmm.
opposed to thriver mode. I realized that if I can get through the day without anybody bothering me, it's a good day.
So how long did you have to live like that till you
Um,
finally, get into a different mode?
um, I think I had my daughter when I was 19. And when my daughter was born, I recognized there was more to life than just surviving
And so you had read The Color Purple when?
when I was 14.
That's amazing that you even know what age. Like your memory is so on point. Of like
Yeah.
that's when it
I,
must have
I
had a
I
huge impact.
remember being 2 years old and standing up inside of my crib. I really do have really strong recollection. It's very troubling for my therapist when I have to tell her, like, she's like, "Do you really remember that, or are you just like?" No, I was like, "No, I did. I can tell you what color the room was. I remember my mom and dad. I remember when my mom and dad were
Wow.
still married. I can tell you what the furniture looked like. I've had conversations with my dad about things that I remember." One of my favorite memories with my dad is my dad let me drive the car, and I've never been small, okay, never.
That-
And so, but I remember being small enough for my dad to stand me up in his lap and my dad had a white 68 Mustang, Ford Mustang. And he used to come pick me up on the weekends, and my dad let me drive the car. And yeah, I know CPS calls nowadays, but
and
my
no,
dad let me
my
drive the.
dad did it too. My
Yeah,
dad did it too.
those of us of a certain generation, our parents let us drive the car.
Yes,
And I
they
just
did.
remember holding the steering wheel going, I'm driving!
Right.
And it probably wasn't very far or fast, but I just remember I am driving the car. It's
Right.
the only reason I've ever loved Mustangs is because that's like one of my best childhood memories is, my dad let me drive the car. And I probably couldn't have been more than 3 or 4 years old.
Yeah, that was definitely our generational thing because
Yeah.
mine did it too.
We
It
were
just
like,
stand you there and go,
let
go
me
ahead,
drive the
drive.
car.
So when you read The Color Purple at 14, it gave you like, right, it's right in between. You're still in survival mode and it gives you this
Yeah.
thing of, I feel seen.
I definitely felt seen. One of those great teachers, Aisha Halkin, she's Dr. Halkin now, but she, it started a cascade of things because she saw me reading the book. I borrowed it from the school library. You can't find that book in a school library
Right.
now. It's probably been banned, but
It's ridiculous. But
yeah,
anyway.
right. But I borrowed it, and she saw me reading the book, and she literally came in the next day and handed me like a stack of all these books by great, Black women writers and poets and all this stuff. And I had no idea. I was like, wait a minute, I knew there were some Black writers out there, but I had no idea the expanse of it, and it made me see that the 10 blocks that I lived in was not the whole world.
Mm,
It totally expounded my thought processes of thinking, okay, wow, there's so much going on. And so in that mindset I kept thinking, if I can get through this part, if I
right.
can get through this part, because I'm a kid still, even though, I have a lot of adult responsibilities, if I can get through this part, it gets better. So in my mind I've always known it gets better. I just, had to figure out how
It's
to
hard
make
when
it
you're going.
better.
And had the abuse stopped at that point?
Yeah, by that time, it stopped when I was probably about 8 or 9 because my
Okay.
mom left that situation, and so,
Okay.
and then we were in another situation, um, and then that situation ended, and then another situation
Oh
began,
my
and that's
God.
how I ended up in North Philadelphia. So I said, my mom had her own issues, and she
Yeah.
just, she did the best that she could with what she had inherited too from her own drama in her life.
So when you had your daughter, right, we tend to go one or two ways. However, we were raised, it's like, I will never put my kid through that, or
Yeah,
you end
that
up
was the road I was.
mimicking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I told, I remember it said, this stops with me. This is
Mm,
some intergenerational stuff. And even this is way before I even went to college. I had no idea about this stuff, but I could. when you start seeing the patterns and you recognizing the patterns, and in my family I could see it, and it was always this mother daughter, mother daughter, and trauma, and I was like, I don't want to do that. And I'm
Right.
definitely, when I had a daughter, it was like, oh, we're not doing that. We're not doing, they have nice terms for it now, like gentle parenting and all this kind of stuff. But I just recognize the fact that how my mother initially tried to raise me didn't work. And eventually she realized it didn't work for me either. And if you
Right.
have a child who is a very intellectual and curious child, old ways of raising them doesn't work. And I think my dad, I think, recognized after a while that, like, you screaming and hollering for 4 hours straight about, somebody leaving, something on the doorstep or what, that I stopped listening to you 15 minutes after you started.
Right.
You lost me. And physical punishment. Like I said, I didn't care. Like, beat me. I would go get my mom the belt. Here you go. And my mom would get mad because I wouldn't cry. My mom would hit me with the belt, and I would just be like,
Is
and
it
my mom
because
would
it
say,
just
"You're
didn't
not going to
really
cry," and I
affect
would
you?
be like, "I don't deserve this beating, so I'm not going to cry."
Wow.
I was 5 when I. And my mother, who was asthmatic, I would just look at her and say, "You're starting to wheeze. You want me to go get your inhaler for
Oh
you?"
my god.
Would make her so mad. So eventually she realized that this is not how you're going to discipline this child. Because for certain children, this does. I didn't care. I did not care. And but yeah. So with my own child, I recognized that I just didn't want that relationship. I didn't want a relationship with my child based in fear.
Right.
Like, I'm going to do what you tell me because I'm scared to death of you. And it's so easy to scare a child,
Yeah. It really
and
is.
that's not the relationship that I wanted to have with my child. And so I started, like, my go-to, I go get a book. I was like, I don't know how to be a mom because I really didn't have a mom. I had a friend and a and
Right.
a and a cheerleader, but I didn't really have a mom. So I don't know how to do that. So I went and got books, and I was like, I want to be Claire Huxtable. Like,
Oh god.
my only frame of reference for good mother parenting is Claire Huxtable. So I'm gonna be the mom who knows how to do everything, and I'm gonna be there, and yeah, I'm gonna read a book and figure out how to do it. It's got to be in a book, right?
Right. Did it work?
Well, yeah, for as long as she was here, she was great. She was really smart. She was very intelligent. But truthfully, she wasn't here to. I wasn't here to parent her. She was here to parent me.
Mm.
Because that was a relationship where I truly learned what unconditional love really looks like and what it feels like, and I learned more from that time period of being her mom than anything else. And that's where the breakthrough came through for me. Because in the process of parenting her, I also got to parent myself. And that's, where healing begins, when you start loving yourself and giving yourself that parenting that you didn't get.
And what was that breakthrough like for you? Like, yeah.
Yeah, you're just like, wow, there's life on the other side of trauma.
I know,
and,
right?
and,
It does.
and,
That's
and
hard to believe sometimes.
Yeah, it is. Especially when you're in the middle of it. And when you're in the midst of it, it seems like such an unbreakable wall to get through. But you catch a glimpse of it, and in my mind, I know it gets better. I know it gets better. I just got to figure out how to get there. Where's the ladder to get me over this wall?
That's
And
impressive that you knew that. You know what I mean? Because even for me, like when I had my brain injury, I was in that dark tunnel, and I thought I'm never gonna get through this. Like it was like a long dark tunnel, and I couldn't see the end, and it was just like I don't know how I'm gonna get through this. And so I was just living in survival mode for
right,
years.
but you
And so
did.
my therapist was like, "You're not meant to live there."
Right. It's not a place you don't unpack, you don't stay. It's not a move-in place. It's not extended stay hotel. You get there, you get there, you see what you need to see, and then you realize, then you shine a black light and you realize you don't need to be there anymore.
And I don't know that, it's impressive that you could figure that out and go, okay, this will get better. Because I didn't even have that. I was so cloaked in darkness that I'm just like, I, I don't know. It's like sticking someone in a dark black room and saying, find your way out.
Right. And you're like, where's the door?
Right. I
The
can't even, are
window.
there walls? Is the
There's like,
floor going
how
to
am I
drop
supposed to
out?
do that? Like, yeah,
Right.
and you feel like you don't have the tools to figure out how to do that. And if no one's given you the tools,
Yeah.
then you don't. You're just surrounded. And I, I saw that, like, even with my peers, like, I've lost so many friends. Like, most of the people I went to high school with are dead, or gone, or, they got caught up in the system. And so it's one of the reasons why I truly know how privileged I am, because I did, for whatever reason, I don't know.
Yeah.
I teach in a prison, and I see the inmates in my classroom, and I think I'm like one like one left turn, and I would be sitting right next to you.
Yeah.
I was can I tell you, I was the Jimmy Lock champion on our block.
What?
I could get inside of a car in 30 seconds and get it started in 30 seconds.
How does one even, I'm sure that wasn't in a book. Like, how does someone,
It was like rite of passage in my neighborhood. It was just what
okay.
kids did. We learned how to break into cars, and you just,
So did someone like teach you that? Right. Because
you
I didn't,
watch people do it for a couple of times, and then you get it. And in the old days, cars, when everything wasn't electric, you just
right.
put a Slim Jim down on the thing, and you slide it up, and you pop the lock. You get in, and you break the chamber on the steering wheel, and then you hot wire the car together, the red and the wires together. And it was like a challenge in our neighborhood to see who could do it the fastest. So when I tell people, I spent a lot of my time trying not to go to jail, but this is what you did. And,
Right.
it seems horrible. I can look back now and go, oh my God, the things that we were doing, but that was normal.
Yeah.
That
And
was
how would you
just
know?
normal.
Right. It wouldn't seem odd because
Right.
it is normal.
And, in the 10 blocks that I live in, this is normal. This is what we do. And at some point I realized this is not really what I want for myself. And one, I think, because I got to switch between worlds, I got
Hmm.
to go between Good Times and Cosby, and see that people don't live like this on the other side of the world. Like, oh, you don't chase rats
The
and with
Cosbys don't live like this.
yeah, right. Even the Cosbys don't live like that, especially now. You just look at it and you go, okay, people don't live like this, and you don't always have to be looking over your shoulder, and you don't always have to be afraid, and everything is not always crisis and one drama, and you can like go to bed at night and not have to worry about gunfire coming in the windows at night and
Yeah.
stuff like that. Just I was like, yeah, sign me up for that. Can you sign me up for the not having to step over people with needles hanging out of their arm to get to school in the morning? Sign me up for that.
Right.
Sign me up for the part where life is good, where I sleep peacefully at night, where, I go to work and do what I like to do and don't have to deal with a whole lot of stress. I'm not worried about coming home to craziness. You sign me up for that. And at some point in my life, I recognize, like, yeah, I want that. Where do you go get that? Let's live that life.
And how did you find that?
One, I left Philadelphia.
That's a
Soon as I,
start.
soon as I turned 18, I was like, deuce, I'm out. Peace out. Like, this is not for me. My dad always said I had too much North Carolina in my blood. I did not belong in Philadelphia. And I remember all my life people saying, you do not belong here. And I did. And I recognized at some point, but, I went from one extreme to the other. I went from like Philadelphia to West Virginia.
Oh, wow.
I went to West Virginia to go to school, and
Okay.
yeah, it was interesting. It was different. I knew what poor was, but I didn't know what poverty really was, and I had never seen
Yeah.
white people like really, really poor, and I was like, wow, this makes the projects look like mansions where I come from. Um, and so then I realized, okay, maybe not quite that extreme. There's a happy
There's
middle.
gotta be.
You went from the hood to the woods. Like, and error. You got to figure it out. And so
Right.
I loved West Virginia. It's beautiful there. I had my bear encounter there, and so that was like one of my first bear encounters was in West Virginia, and so that's when I started recognizing the bear thing. Um, and I had my daughter in West Virginia, and at some point my dad was like, "You cannot stay there. You cannot stay in West Virginia. I'm coming to get you." Like, no, you can't stay here. I think my daughter was like 3 or 4 years old, and she was probably talking on the phone, and my dad could hear that West Virginia accent coming out. My dad was like, "Oh hell no, I'm coming to get you right now." And my dad literally drove his truck all the way from Charlotte to West Virginia and said, "Get your shit and put it in the car." And we no, you are not. She is not growing up talking like that. No. My dad was like, "I don't care what we're gonna do, but you no. Oh hell no." So yeah, and then that's when we came back to North Carolina, and that was when I started like building my life, trying to figure out, okay, what am I doing?
Right.
Do I need to go to school? Do I need to work? I did both. I was a single mom, and I didn't get I love child support. What's that?
Right.
I was basically raising this kid. My dad was amazing. He was the best grandpa ever. And so I was able to do a lot of things. And like I said, for me, education was always a thing because, books were always the way for me to enlighten
Yeah.
myself and learn about things.
I get that. I mean, I have the same affinity. Even now, I don't like reading on a tablet. I want a book in my hand.
Yeah, I'm a book. I like books. I like the way they
Yeah, I
smell.
like the pages,
I
the
like
feel of
holding
it.
them. Yeah.
Yeah, all of that. It's like
Yeah.
everybody's like, you should have a tablet. I'm like, I don't want to hold a tablet.
He's like, "Yeah, I got one of those. I still got books, though."
Right.
Like, yeah,
Right. I want a
I like
book. I want
I
to
like
hold
my
a book.
books. If I don't
So
like the
was
book,
so with your daughter being there now and all of that, does that shift you now more into a centered, who am I? What am I going to do? Because like when we met, right, there was a lot of you were much more into spirituality and stuff like I was doing and getting into all that. When
Mhm.
did that start to enter into your life?
I think I've always been a very spiritual person. I think it grounded me a lot. It's the thing that kept me sane a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Again, my mom, it was like with mom, it was always like, "What religion are we this week, mom?" You're like,
Oh my God.
like this week we're Buddhists, next week we're Jehovah's Witnesses, next week we'll be Holiness Pentecostals. We're going to be My mom was adamant we were never going to be Catholics, but because she had to go to Catholic school, and so she was very adamant that we weren't going to Catholic. But I know at one point I wanted to be a nun, and my mom was just like, "No, we're not Catholic. You can't do that." So, but so I got the experience of a lot of different kinds of worship and faith, and I was just always curious, so I would just go
Mm-hmm.
and ask people about their faith and how they practice it, and I could see the similarities in the different ways that people grounded themselves and how they felt hopeful and and kept their faith. And so, but I think I've just always been that way.
That's pretty impressive. Well, I mean, you'd had a big exposure to it if you
Yeah,
were
right.
changing to.
So you name the cult, we've been part of it. I think the only thing mom didn't get married to, 14 other wives. But other than that, I think we've walked through all of them, all those doors at some point. Great thing also about Philadelphia is like, you got to see everything. It's like Hare
Right.
Krishna's on this corner, Nation of Islam on that corner, competing, bean pies on one side, beans on the other side. You got all of it. We got all of it. and,
So,
and
is
it's,
there something that you wanted, like when you had your own daughter? Like, I know my mom had us go to Catholic school or Catholic church in Sunday
yeah,
school just because she wanted us to be exposed to something. You know what I mean? We weren't like strict Catholics by any
right.
means, but she's like, I want you to
And
have
I went to
exposure to
Catholic school
something.
too because that was just when I was younger. We went to Catholic school because that was just a better education
Right.
at that point in time. I wanted my daughter to have a foundation. I didn't want her to get swept up in the messenger as much
Okay.
as the message.
Right.
And so when she was younger, we kind of went to mostly Christian churches, just because that's kind of like what I experienced.
Mm.
And there was some beauty in it. And I love, of course, I love the Bible. But my daughter, I also read to her from the Quran or the Torah, or we also read from Bhagavad Gita. We ran, again, I passed on this love of books and learning and reading and doing like comparisons. So she got that exposure. But her little friends would come along and they would go to Sunday school and that sort of thing. And I was like, okay, And again, I have to always say prefaces. It's about the message, not the messenger.
Right. Which is a big problem.
It's a problem because I don't always like the messenger. I like the message. I just don't always like the messenger. That's
Well, right. And that, and then that could be a whole other
a
podcast.
whole nother podcast.
And I was going to go down there, but I'm like, no,
No,
it'll
let's
end up,
not. Pull
that'll be
up,
another
rabbit.
hour for
Pull up,
us.
rabbit. Come back, rabbit. Come back.
So I know your history. I know a lot of things you've been through, and I know you have a huge, when you share it, people really listen and you have an impact on people in a big way because you've experienced so much. So is there a specific memory for you or encounter that makes you realize or have made you realize the profound impact of your story that you have on others?
Um. Well, every 6 weeks I get to impact a new group of people.
Yeah.
At the prison, and usually by the end of those 6 weeks, you know, my ego, of course, gets stroked because I have people that who previously maybe did not believe that they were capable of doing some things.
Mm-hmm.
And they recognize that even though they might have some deficits or they might be starting out a little short, that they're still capable of doing amazing things. That And of course, even I overshare. Even in my class, I overshare because I feel like the people that I teach, there are other women, and I just think that we don't talk about stuff, and people think they're
Yeah.
alone, and
Yeah.
nobody understands. And I know what that feels like when you think you're the only one who's been through this or who's experienced this. And I think what touches me most, more probably than anything, is when people kind of like, descale their eyes and recognize, wait a minute, it's not just me. It's not just me. In one of my classes, I, just, voluntarily ask everybody, what have you been through? Like, what do you like? Who's a high school dropout? And I raise my hand and they all look at me like, I'm a high school dropout. I got the good enough diploma.
I don't even think I knew that.
Yeah. I dropped out after the 10th grade. I just couldn't stand it. I hated high school. Yeah, I finished at Job Corps. I finished my high school at Job Corps. I'm a high school dropout. I was a teen mom. I'm the child of an addict. Um, you know, no one will ever see my juvenile record. Yeah, there is one. But no one will ever see it. Um, I've been arrested. I've gotten in trouble. I've done stupid stuff. I'm human, and
Yeah.
and it's so easy to get caught up into it. But I was like, it's only your story if you fall in love with it, And it's something I always tell my students,
Oh, I
like,
love that.
are you in love with your story? How much are you in love? Especially because I'm dealing, like, if you're walking in a form of recovery, and we all should be in some form of recovery,
Right.
how in love with your story are you? Are you setting up the stage every single time? So tell me how you are. Well, let me tell you about this time when I was like,
Yeah.
oh, well, and then this happened, and then when I was 7 years old, and I have people do that, and I'll be like, oh, stop, stop. The stage is all lit up. That the house
Right.
is packed. You are so in love with this story that you can't even see past it. How do you
Huge.
have room for the new stuff to come in when you have given this story pride of place? Yeah. No, no. And I think once you recognize that it's just a story. I always tell
Yeah.
people, like, I am a beautiful quilt, and there's some ugly patches and there's some worn, beat up places, and I never want to lose them, but they're not in the middle of the quilt. They're around the edges, Yeah, they're on the side. You know it's there, but I don't have to look directly at it every single day because I have so many other beautiful pieces in this quilt that are amazing and that I do want to be front and center. Why would I fall in love with my raggedy pieces?
Well, and I think part of it, and it kind of reminds me of this quote from the movie 28 Days with Sandra Bullock. When I'm sure a lot of people have seen it, where she goes to rehab and they're shoveling out the horse stalls or whatever, and she's talking about all the stuff she did, and he stops her and he said, "Those are the things you did. That isn't who you are."
Right.
You know what
Exactly.
I mean? And I think that's the difference of understanding. Yes, I may have done these things, but that doesn't
Right.
mean that's who I am.
That's not, I always say circumstances are not definitions.
Right.
A direct goddess quote. Circumstances are not
We'll be
definitions.
using that.
Yeah, circumstances are not definitions. You found yourself in a situation, and it was a circumstance, and you might have made a decision based off of that circumstance, but that's not a definition.
Right.
That doesn't, define who you are. You made a choice, and at that moment, that might have been the option that you had. It's, we all have perfect vision in, from where we are in the present,
Oh
to
yeah.
look in the back and say, oh, well, what you should have done was, ugh, but you didn't. And for whatever reason, you didn't.
Right.
But here we are now, and here we are now, and here we are now.
So what
So,
made you want to? I mean, that's going to have a big, profound impact on these prisoners,
yeah,
right?
it does, because
Hearing,
I have to
watching
explain.
you. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I have to explain to them that, I mean, I have to be realistic. In the world that we live in, all of my students aren't going to make it. They're
Right.
not. Um, and I remember, I've lost a couple because, they just, for whatever reason, there's a gap, and it doesn't connect. But I need for a lot of my students to understand that that cute little monkey you walked in with is now a 600-pound gorilla, and he's
Mm,
been in the gym working out. So the minute you walk out this door back out into the world, we need to be realistic about the fact that that gorilla is going to kick your ass
right.
every single day until you stop giving him time. Stop feeding him. I always say, don't feed stray cats. I love cats, you know that, but don't
Yeah.
feed them. Because if you feed a stray cat, that's your cat now. Cats
Yeah.
are very smart. That's your cat. Don't feed stray cats or monsters. Don't feed them. They go away. But you have to recognize them. And for my students, I need for them to really, because for them it is a monster. Some of
Yeah.
them have some monsters, and they need to be. I was like, I need you to walk out the door ready to throat punch anything coming at you that does not serve you. You got to walk out in like hiya mode. You're like ready. You got to be ready. There's going to be some fighting, but you have to decide that your life is worth fighting for, and
Right.
that can only come from inside. That's something you have to, like. Oh, I am so worth it.
And I think that's different, right? Like you're dealing with people who are innately put in jail and told you're not.
You're not. On a day-to-day basis, you're hearing
Right.
that you're
No.
less than.
Right.
And I have to come in here and correct that thinking. I need you to think with that other part of your brain that you're not using, that says this is bullshit and
Right.
I am so worth it.
So
I
really,
always
your
tell,
upbringing prepared you for this.
right, everything. I always say little cups into big cups.
Yeah.
All the little cups pour into, you don't start out with a big gulp. You got to start out with a sippy cup. Right? You got to start out with a sippy cup and then work your way up to the big gulp. Because, if I give a big gulp to a 2-year-old, it's going to be a mess. It's going to be a hot mess. And but you gotta, everything about my life has poured into the big goal. So and that's why I think it was, there's an old song that says, "Wouldn't take nothing for my journey now." I wouldn't change anything that I've experienced in my life, because I use all of that. I use it all.
But that's really right. That's the reason that we go through what we go through later in
Right?
life. You can look back and go, oh, that's why I went through
That's
that.
why that happened. Yeah,
Yeah.
because how much of a fraud would I look like sitting up in my women's prison and talk, well, if you make better decisions, then you'll have better outcomes. How fucking fake is that? Like, let me tell you about what's going to happen when you fall on your ass, because this is what's going to happen. But you
Right.
can get up, fall down 7 times, get up 8. Let me tell
Well,
you how to get
and
up that 8th time.
right. And I want to hear about that from somebody who I know has done it.
Right. So when the high school dropout teen mom, dope addict mom, comes at you and tells you you can get through this, let me tell you some stuff that might help you get through this. It's a little bit more authentic than, if I just walked out with my pieces. Nobody gives a shit about my pieces of paper. Like, I got pieces
Right.
of paper. Nobody cares about them.
No, they don't.
They don't.
They don't.
Nobody, I mean, they were expensive, but they
Yes.
didn't, they were expensive. But they don't make me more authentic. My life is what has made me me. The pieces of
Right.
paper just back me up. It just looks nice when I sign on a piece of
Well, yeah,
paper.
nobody ever asked for that. I mean, nobody ever
Nobody,
asked to
yeah,
look.
and they don't care. They don't
No,
care.
no. So to your point, yeah, it's a piece of paper.
It's a
It's
piece
something
of
we were
paper.
told to get, and
Yeah, it was an expensive piece of paper.
it was.
Very expensive piece of paper that I finally paid for. Thank
I'm still paying for
you. I
it.
know, right? You're just like, oh
um,
wow.
so I ask everybody that comes on this podcast this question, and I like to end it because I think I love to hear the varied answers, and I think it also helps to find other people to find their answer. So this is a question: describe your spiritual North Star that guides you whenever you feel lost or uncertain.
Well, I carry my North Star inside of me. I am never outside of God, and God is never outside of me. I love that Rumi said, "You are not a drop in the ocean, you are the entire ocean in one
Mm-hmm.
drop." And that is my guiding principle, that I recognize that I am never out here floundering. It's always inside of me, it's always there. And if it can live inside of me, then I can live inside of me. If it can reside in this place, then I can reside in this place. Every day that I wake up, I know I'm supposed to still be here. Um, like, my story with illness and family and loss and all that kind of stuff. If I keep waking up, then I'm still supposed to be here. I'm not done yet. So that's my principle of knowing that it's always there with me, and as long as it's with me, then it's with me.
That's beautiful. I love that. I want to thank you for coming on here,
No, it's my pleasure.
sharing just a small fraction. I definitely will be bringing you back to talk about more conversations because there's so much more I want to talk about with you that we didn't even have time to cover.
Yeah, right. Well,
But I
anytime.
appreciate you. I love you.
I love you.
So everybody else, remember, stay curious, stay empowered, and keep shining your unique light. We'll see you on the next one. Bye, everybody.